We're here with author and entrepreneur Stuart Cohen to talk about his company Invisible World Clothing. Good morning, Stuart, and how are things in Juneau, Alaska this morning?
Very snowy. There's high avalanche hazard warnings out right now.
That sounds like that could get exciting fast.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you this morning, how did the idea of selling all these amazing authentic clothes from around the world take shape?
Well, originally it was very simple. I was down in Ecuador, and I was I think I was 25 at the time, and I saw some sweaters in Otavalo, and I thought, gosh, if I could buy some of those sweaters and I could sell them in Alaska, and I could make enough money to come back here. And that's how it began, and that's still basically what we're doing.
Very cool. So it kind of facilitated your travels initially.
Yes, and it still does.
Was that the first product that you sold?
Yeah, the first product we sold were the sweaters from Otavalo, and they were, at that time they were very primitive. They've come a long way. At that time the dyes would run and that sort of thing, and gradually they've gotten much more sophisticated, and the quality has gotten really excellent and very uniform. And so we're still selling them, and actually we're selling them, I believe, for about the same amount that we were selling them for in 1984. Price has gone up and down, but, that's where it is now.
Well, that's amazingly rare these days.
Yeah, it is.
When did Invisible World come about, and what inspired you to start the company?
Well, one thing I will say is Invisible World never does anything just for the money. The decisions that we make in terms of how to getting into a product line and that sort of thing have to do with whether it'd be interesting to go there, whether it's a place we want to do business, and whether we're interested in those products.
Your company shares the same name as one of your novels. How did that come about?
Well, originally the business had a different name, but as we began dealing with more countries and doing more travel, the idea formed in my head that the things that we got, the products, which were from Bolivia and Peru and Inner Mongolia, places where people have heard of but have never been to, that these products formed a sort of map of an invisible world in people's imaginations. And that idea that sprang from all the travel for the business got reinforced in my mind and eventually became a novel called Invisible World, which explores that idea in depth. And I was fortunate with that. That was my first novel, and that came out in, was translated into 6 languages, and it's kind of all one. The store, the novel, life, it's all one.
I have to ask that traveling to all of these fascinating locations and exploring new cultures must be pretty amazing. Are you still able to enjoy these experiences while performing your business duty?
Oh, definitely. For one thing, we've been dealing with some of our suppliers for 25 years. So at this point, they're friends. Often I stay at their houses, and it's always interesting to go down and talk to people who are in business and talk to them about the economy and politics and those sorts of things. It's also fascinating to see what happens in these countries over time. And you might think going to the same places over and over again might become boring, but it's not, because it's sort of a different kind of tourism. It's being a tourist through time. And some of these countries, I've seen them go through 3 different currencies and many different governments, and it's just fascinating. As I said, basically I consider myself a tourist.
Well, I've got to travel a lot in my life, but never as extensively as you, so I doubt that I would ever find your adventures boring. Now, many consumers these days, they want to know that their purchases are creating a positive effect on the world and the people that are producing them. Your products are unique in that aspect. Tell us about the people who produce Invisible World products.
We deal with small family-owned companies all over the world, and we deal with a very wide variety of people. Some of our suppliers are Otavalan Indians in northern Ecuador that speak Quechua and Spanish. Others are Chinese yuppies, and others are American expatriates living in Bolivia, or sometimes wealthy South Americans. And so the money is going directly from us to the producers, and then it goes from them to the knitters and that sort of thing. In a business that requires a lot of skill, where you're using a lot of hand labor to make a complex product, which is what we're dealing with, you really can't mistreat your workers. You have to treat your workers well in order to keep them. So the people that we're working with generally are well paid on the scale of the countries that they are from, and often extremely well paid. So it's not like we're dealing with an agricultural product where labor is interchangeable. Because it's a complex, skilled labor, people tend to earn decent wages.
What sets the Invisible World products apart from department store clothes that you can get anywhere?
Invisible World's niche is exotic fibers from exotic places. That's how I think of it. And they're materials that aren't easy to find, such as alpaca and cashmere or hand-woven silk, and they usually have a lot of handwork. Department store clothes, on the other hand, tend to be more industrially produced.
Yeah, no question. Now, what kind of feedback do you get from your customers when they receive these garments from around the world?
I think usually people are very pleased. Occasionally you might have something that doesn't fit or something like that, but I think usually people are very pleasantly surprised because Invisible World clothes, what we intend for them to be is kind of a link between the people who made them and the cultures that they come from, and then the people who end up buying them and wearing them. So usually people are delighted with them.
Very cool. Silk has long been coveted. Share with us how Invisible World came to sell silk garments.
I was traveling in China. I'd just gone to a friend's wedding in Hong Kong, and I went to China to look around. And this was 1991. China was still a communist country, really a communist country, not like now. All the factories were owned by the state, and it was very difficult to do business. There was a whole entire currency that foreigners had to use called foreign exchange certificates, which cost more than the regular currency. So I saw some silk around, and I thought, it'd be really interesting to get into the silk business because I could come back to China, I'd learn all about China and Chinese culture and history, and silk is just a fascinating material. So I made the effort, and it was a huge effort at that time. I made the effort to find something that I could sell in the United States, and went into business and ended up forming my own workshop with a family of silk painters there, and we're still working with the same people 20 years later.
Well, silk is truly a unique fabric and how it came about. Can you share with us a little history of Chinese silk?
Yeah, silk is, I think of all our materials, it's the one that most fascinates me. Sericulture goes back about 6,000 years in the area where I am buying, which is in Suzhou. And Suzhou has been a very famous silk-producing area for more than 2,000 years. During silk was its contact with the West. First, sericulture was a very carefully guarded secret that was within China, and gradually it started spreading to other parts of Southeast Asia. But in the West, it was very mysterious. During the Roman Empire around, say, 200 BC, or 200, about 0 AD, coincided with the Han Dynasty, which was one of the first really big, powerful dynasties in China. And what we now think of the Silk Road through Central Asia, all the way to Constantinople, became calm enough that silk could make its way to the West for the first time. And people there just didn't, it was this strange, shiny fiber, and they didn't really know that it was made by worms. They knew very little about it. And it was worth its weight in gold. They would actually get silk cloth into Rome, and they would unravel the cloth down to its threads and then reweave it into designs that they liked. So that's how valuable it was that they would actually spend the effort to do that. And then when the Han Dynasty fell and the Roman Empire got choppier, that connection was lost. And then that connection came back during the Middle Ages, during the time of Marco Polo. And once again, silk made its way to the Western world. And again, it was incredibly expensive.
Well, where do Invisible World silk products come from, and how did that connection come about?
We buy our silk in China and in Thailand. And in China, I told you about. Thailand, what happened was I saw some beautiful hand-woven silk scarves at a friend's house, and these scarves were from Laos. And originally I was going to go to Laos and source them just because I thought they were beautiful. And I ended up going to Thailand instead. It's more accessible than Laos, and they have a bigger selection. And that's how we started dealing with that. Although they are two very different kinds of silk.
So what is unique about the culture and the people there that you think Invisible World customers might find interesting?
Well, Suzhou has long been a cultural center of China. It's very famous for two things, for its gardens and for its beautiful women. And so the city of Suzhou is peppered with these gorgeous ancient gardens. Some of them are 800 years old. And I always go to the gardens when I go to Suzhou. And originally, when we were first starting out, I remember we would go to these gardens and talk about business and how to solve problems as we sat in these beautiful gardens. And it's also a place where there's been a lot of artists and poets, Suzhou is. And Thailand is very different. The silk production in Thailand is it's like handmade. It's more like South America. In Thailand, the silk is kind of made, it's almost like it's made in people's backyards, that it's on a much smaller scale. It's much more of a cottage industry, and it's much more manually done. So in China, we're tending to we're doing hand-painted silk and silk that's made on big rolls in factories, and then the handwork comes in the painting and the cutting and the sewing. In Thailand, it's the opposite. The silk is all made in very small workshops, and it's woven by hand on looms. And so it's a very different kind of production.
Well, when these products are finally finished and all this craftsmanship has created the final product, what are the desirable attributes of silk as a fiber that people want so much?
First of all, it's, of course, the beautiful glow that silk has. And after that, it's very warm, and it's very light. And it provides a nice contrast to what other fabric you're wearing, whether it's cotton or wool. When you put on silk, it just sort of brightens everything up and creates a focal point for your outfit.
What's your favorite Invisible World silk product?
Oh, that's like asking me what's my favorite child. I really love I think I'm partial to the hand-woven silk scarves most of all. I mean, I love it all. And we do, with all of our silk, especially the hand-painted silk, we do a tremendous amount of design work also. We originate that. Those are all our designs, and they're all exclusive to our store. But I just love the handwork in the hand-woven silk.
Once again, Stuart, we appreciate you sharing your knowledge, experiences, and yourself with all of us. That was author and entrepreneur Stuart Cohen, founder of the online clothing store Invisible World. You can see all of these great clothing products and Stuart's novels at invisibleworld.com.